Hi, I'm Matthew Giobbi. I'd like to present to you today a little video on demystifying liturgical modes in music. I learned about the liturgical modes, the church modes, modal harmony, through classical music training in conservatory. And when I became interested in jazz and improvisation, I found that there was an overlap between my study of composition, classical composition, and jazz improvisation. So the difference between composition and improvisation is one of a matter of time. In composition, you sit down and you have hours, days, weeks, months, years to edit your composition. In improvisation, you have about 500 milliseconds to edit your composition. It's called improv, it's spontaneous. But the materials are very much the same. However, the nature of how these materials are understood is very different in my experience. So what I would like to do with this video is introduce classical musicians to how jazz musicians utilize the liturgical modes, also to introduce performers to how composers think about modal harmony, to talk about the connections between diatonic harmony and modal harmony in a very practical way. Those are my goals here, to demystify modes. Now the approach I'm going to take, I like to liken as multi-perspectivism. So it's going to be like looking at a cubist painting. If you've ever gone to the mall and gone into the dressing room, tried on some new clothing, you know you come out of the dressing room and there's this mirror that has mirrors at different angles and then one behind you. And you stand in front of the mirror and you can get a point of view that's directly in front of you. Then you can get the side angles, you can get extreme side angles, and you can look and see in the mirror behind you what you look like from behind. And this is how we're going to approach looking at modes. First I'm going to introduce the modes, looking at them head on. Then we're going to look at the same modes from different angles, and finally coming around the back and looking at them from reverse. And I think in doing this, this is going to bring a lot of disparate views of the modes together and help you to really understand how you can use them in composition, in improvisation, and in listening and analyzing music that's already composed. Church modes, the liturgical modes, are used in classical music, they're used in folk music, they're used in jazz, they're used in all styles of music. Whether or not the composer knows they're using them, they're there. And they're part of our cultural system. We even find them seeping into non-Western musical forms. The ragas, for example, are very similar in many ways and sometimes identical to our liturgical mode systems. So this is my contribution in maybe giving a full or a fuller account of how these modes work in classical, jazz, pop, and folk music. I hope you enjoy. So in an attempt to clearly understand the liturgical modes, I'm going to present them to you in three ways. The first way to present this, these liturgical modes is through simply inverting a major scale. So if we take C to C, we'll use C because there are no sharps and no flats. We have what we commonly know in Western classical harmony as a C major scale. Predating our contemporary diatonic harmonic system of 12 keys, there existed what we called modes. These originated in Egypt, pre-Egyptian possibly, Babylonian Empire, Sumerian Empire, and into ancient Greece, and they survive up until the present. They've been used in classical music and liturgical music. They've been used in folk music and are very much used in jazz. So this C major scale can also be known as an Ionian mode. If we take this C major scale and invert it D to D, so we start on D, what is referred to as the Dorian Mode. If we invert it again, E to E, we have what is known as the Phrygian Mode. If we play F to F, the fourth degree of the C major scale, that's called the Lydian Mode. G to G is Mixolydian on the fifth degree. A to A, we recognize that as the natural minor scale. The relative minor of C major is A minor. It's also known as the Aeolian Mode. And finally, B to B is the B Locrian Mode. So those are the 7 modes, and we can do that starting on any pitch. So we can have C Ionian, we can have F Ionian, also known as F major. We can have, built within this F major inverted scale, we start on G and play the B flat. We have G Dorian, etc. So now this is a customarily easy to understand way of introducing the modes. However, it's much more textured, and I'm going to present these modes now in a different way. I want to now look at the stepwise structure between each of the modes. So if we have C Ionian, this is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So starting on any note, if we go whole, half, whole, half, we'll get an Ionian liturgical mode, or as we know it, C major. Whole step, half step. So we can start on any of the 12 notes and build an Ionian mode or major scale from this formula of whole, half, whole, half. Now each of these liturgical modes has a combination of whole steps and half steps. For example, Dorian mode. So there's the D. So to build a Dorian scale on any note, we would do whole, half, whole, half, whole. For example, in C, there's C Ionian or C major. We can make this C Dorian by simply going whole step, half step, whole, half, whole. So C Dorian would be. Now I'm just going to pause a moment to let that sink in. Pause the video, because we're looking at these modes now in a slightly different way. We can talk about modes being built as inversions within the scale. We can also talk about the construction of whole steps and half steps. And we can apply this to building all 7 of the modes from one note. So this is another way of looking at this, of looking at understanding modes. So for example, we can have C Ionian, we can have C Dorian. We can have C Phrygian. We can have C Lydian. We can have C Mixolydian. We can have C Aeolian. That should sound familiar to you because it's also C minor. We can also have C Locrian. So we can build each of the liturgical modes on one note, and we can also understand these as inversions of different major scales. So those are two ways of understanding the modes. The third way of understanding the modes is through the codes of step. We can have the combination of stepwise patterns of half steps, whole steps to build each mode. Let's revisit this idea of whole steps and half step combinations to build the modes. And then we'll go to one last way of understanding how we can think of these modes. Firstly, as we said, Ionian. That's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If we now want to go to a Dorian scale, that would be whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. If we want to play C Phrygian, we have half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. If we'd like to play C Lydian, we would have whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. If we'd like to play C Mixolydian, in C Mixolydian, we would have whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. And if we'd like to play C Aeolian, which is the same as C minor, we have whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And finally, the C Locrian. That's half step, half step, whole step, whole step. So we have looked now at the liturgical modes as being inversions of a major scale. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. And we specifically say, if we're doing it in this way, C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. But we also understand that we can build a mode off of one note. Each of the notes have 7 modes through whole steps and half steps. So we can have C Ionian, we can have C Dorian, we can have C Phrygian, we can have C Lydian, we can have C Mixolydian, we can have C Aeolian, and we can have C Locrian. And we can build a mode off of each of the 12 different tones. Each of the 12 tones can be played as a root note in all 7 modes. Let's play, for instance, F. So the F major scale can be understood as being F Ionian, G Dorian, A Phrygian, B flat Lydian, C Mixolydian, D Aeolian or D minor, and E Locrian. So all of these methods of understanding the modes fit together. They dovetail like pieces of a puzzle. We can understand the modes as originating or being inversions of a major scale. We can imagine modes as being a combination of whole steps and half steps. We can also imagine a mode as an alteration. This is another way of looking at the modes, as an alteration of the major scale. So for example, C major scale, unaltered, would be C Ionian. A C major scale that you want to change to a Dorian, you would imagine flatting the 3rd and flatting the 7th. If you want to create the C Phrygian scale, you would imagine flatting the 2nd, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. If you would like to think about playing the C Lydian, you would flat the 5th. Or sharp the 4th. If you want to think about playing C Mixolydian, then you flat the 7th. If you'd like to play C Aeolian, you'd flat the 3rd, 6th, and 7th. If you'd like to play the C Locrian, you would flat the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So now we've looked at these modes in many different ways, and it should be, you may have to watch this video a few times, you may have to watch other people's presentations of this, read as much as you can, and it will begin to make sense to you how it all fits together. But basically, looking at modes as being inversions of a major scale is one way of looking at the mode. We can then step away and look at modes as being built from one note as a combination of whole steps and half steps. We can then also look at modes and understand them as alterations of a major scale. These are all different ways of looking at modes. Now, what I'd like to show you is how these modes are used for compositional purposes and for jazz improvisation. So when we talk about the use of modes in composition, and we talk about using modes in improvisation, we're understanding improvisation as spontaneous composition, so they're really the same phenomenon that we're going to discuss. It's just in composition you're going to sit back and take time to edit and make over time changes to the composition, whereas in improvisation you're spontaneously composing in the moment. But they're both using the modes in the same way. If we hear this mode, let's just talk about C. We're going to do everything in the key of C because it'll just be easier to introduce these concepts. So if we understand the key of C Ionian, we can, there are certain harmonies, certain chords that fit nicely with this scale. And that chord is basically, usually, the major seventh chord. So if we play a major seventh chord, we know that we can play C Ionian, C7, over that chord. And that's what we call a chord scale. So the major seventh chord has a complementary mode, Ionian mode, that we can solo with. Now let's take a look at the next of the modes, the Dorian. This is going to suggest a harmony as well, and that is the C minor seventh chord. So if we see a C minor triad with a seventh, C minor 7, we know that we can play the Dorian mode. That chord outlines this mode, this chord scale. Modes are also referred to as chord scales. Now let's take a look at the C Phrygian mode. Remember, that's the flatted 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th. Well, again, you can use that depending on the composition, maybe in the minor 7th. And now we have next the Lydian. Remember, that has the tritone, the flatted 5th or the sharped 4th, augmented 4th. And again, we can use this for this C major chord, a major 7th chord. We can use it with other chords as well, but for this purpose, it's just to get an introduction and understanding of how the modes and the chords fit together for improvisation and for composition. Next, we want to, so that's Lydian, let's look at Mixolydian. It's like a major scale with a flat 7, and of course that is nice for a dominant 7th chord. So we have a major 7th chord, and here's the dominant 7th chord. That's a C. It's a major triad with a flat 7. And let's look now at C Aeolian. And of course this outlines a C minor 7 chord. And finally, very interesting, is the Locrian. C Locrian. And this is going to outline a C diminished. So when you hear that diminished 7th chord, fits in nicely to harmonize it, that it harmonizes, is the C Locrian. And it's very interesting to note, yet another way of thinking about modes is that this is the leading tone to D flat. So we can think of D flat played in its 7th inversion as encapsulating the C Locrian, C diminished. So that's a conclusion of the video. I'd like to recommend that you check out a variety of videos, variety of perspectives. There, I'm sure, are ways of looking at modes that I am unaware of. Keep seeking, keep learning, re-watch, reread. I can recommend the Aldwell and Schachter Harmony and Voice Leading book as a good introduction. I can recommend Walter Piston's book on harmony as a good introduction. There are many musicians that are sharing their wisdom and knowledge on the internet, all these websites, just to see how people are understanding the relationship between diatonic harmony and the modal system. I think that's all that I know at this point regarding the modes and how they function compositionally and for improv. So happy exploring and happy playing. Thanks for watching. Hi, I'm Matthew Giobbi. I'd like to tell you about my beginner trombone method book. It's available on barnesandnoble.com, on amazon.com, and it's Method for Trombone Volume 1 by Matthew Giobbi. This book will get you started in classical and jazz playing, everything you need to know. And I've designed and written it in a way in which you can learn through the alphabetic memorization process. So in other words, this is a book that is filled with illustrations of letter names. So it goes through all of the intervals. It goes through all of the triad arpeggios, all the 7th chord arpeggios, all the major and minor scales, all of the blues scales and pentatonic scales, the liturgical modes. Everything's in this book, and I've also included an introduction which goes into specifics about how to go about practicing, about different articulations, everything that the beginner needs to know. If you use this book, you memorize everything in this book, you have a solid start for being a trombonist. Classical, jazz, pop, anything you want to play. This is going to build your embouchure. It's going to give you all the rudiments, all the basic vocabulary that all music is written from. So if you're enjoying these video lessons and you want to have something to follow along with, I suggest picking up Method for Trombone Volume 1 by Matthew Giobbi.